So, Musk et al. Are planning to go to space to avoid our increasingly hostile Earth. But they'll have to overcome challenges like transportation, life support, radiation exposure, gravity effects, habitat infrastructure, and sustainability. But why go to Mars when we can just fix Earth?
Europe will be hit the hardest by climate change. But how did we get here? So Europe has already had some days 1.5 degrees warmer than before the Industrial Revolution. The objective of the Paris Agreement was to keep temperature rise to 1.5 degrees by 2100. We're seeing more and more extreme weather events. It's getting harder and harder to grow food on increasingly dead soil. Time is running out. Can we save the world from climate catastrophe? We're trying to make the EU do something to stop the climate and ecological catastrophe. We're trying to make us transition to a climate neutral way of life. We want to work to save our soil, water, ecosystems, and we're trying to find ways to avoid worsening climate change. We're trying to clean our air. We want to create new, secure, well-paid jobs. We're calling all of this the Green Deal.
What I'm most excited about is during the campaign in 2019, we promised a European Green Deal. And at the end of the day, we made sure that more than 30 legislations have passed the Parliament and made it into real legislation. Legislation around more nature, improving life of farmers, making the newest cars with the newest technology sustainable, social and fair.
So this is the Green Deal. It's a package of policies which aims to put the EU on the path to a green transition and to get us to climate neutrality by 2050. It's also an injection into the economy, aiming to make the EU a fairer and more prosperous place. Here's some of the flagship files in our Green Deal. In the area of climate action, we've got the EU climate law, the emissions trading system, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, the social climate fund, CO2 standards for cars and vans. And in the area of nature protection, we have the nature restoration law as well as the deforestation law. Coming to the circular economy, we have the ambient air quality directives and the packaging and packaging waste regulation.
When I was elected in 2019, it was after a time where we had thousands of young people on the streets demanding the European Union to act on the climate. And now we can say we did. We did start with the Green Deal. We did start a big climate movement on the European level. And the Socialists and Democrats have been the leading force behind it. And we are able and ready to continue this fight for a social Green Deal.
Well, we are in front of a urban highway. This kind of urban highways that we can find in all the big cities in Europe. We are here because we want to talk about air pollution and air quality and how now the European Union, we are improving the standards to improve the air quality and have a cleaner air. Why? Why this matter? This matter because this is the biggest environmental threat to the human health. And this is the message that the European Commission and the Environmental European Agency made during the last years. We have a new regulation to tackle 300,000 premature deaths related to air pollution that we have every year in Europe. We are not anti-cars, and this legislation, it's not trying to ban cars or to ban our industry. What we want is to have cleaner cars and cleaner industries. And this is something that we can do. Mobility is a right and has to be guaranteed. And with the new legislation, we will have mobility, but clean mobility. Now, the air is officially horrible. Nowadays, we know that the majority of the urban areas are not respecting the current standard. It's also related to income, the quality of the air that we are living, especially taking into account the different neighbors that we have. If we tackle pollution, we are also tackling inequalities and fighting for social justice.
Biodiversity protection is increasingly recognized as important as climate action. Last year, the EU agreed to move forwards with a biodiversity strategy to address the causes of nature loss.
Well, restoring nature could help there because we know that the biodiversity is improving the air quality.
With forests, we have perfect allies in the combat against climate change because they are the ones who can do something that some people now try to do technology. They can take out the CO2 out of the atmosphere and store them inside of the woods they are producing. So this is a really amazing quality that we need to use because without the forest, without the peatlands, we cannot fulfill our climate targets. We need our natural things more than we need to have some technology future that we don't know that will exist. We can use what we already have, the forests. We fought very, very hard for this law because 80% of our forests, of our other valuable ecosystems are in a very bad shape. They cannot absorb CO2 out of the atmosphere simply because they are not in a good health. And this is what we need to change, and this is why, with the nature restoration law, we want to make sure that all the valuable ecosystems are in a good shape again. We want to restore them, and for that we need the goals that we are setting on a European level.
Climate change is hitting our farmers hard, but also big intensive agriculture is a huge source of emissions and pollution. How can we secure our food security and make our agriculture more sustainable?
We try to improve the food security by making sure that small and medium-sized family farms get the big share of the common agricultural policy. Too much of the money, around 80%, goes to the 20% largest farmers, and we think that's not fair. As Social Democrats, we try to make sure that as much money as possible goes to the small and medium-sized family farms we have all over Europe. We made a package that has support from NGOs, but also from industry and from our citizens. And we made sure that many rules and regulations we have set in Europe are also matched to producers outside Europe.
Okay, we need to decouple economic growth from resource use. We need to shift to circular systems.
Again, we are talking about a business model that is exploiting people and planet. With the fast fashion industry, we have an absurdity of pace and resources that are being used and produced under slavery-like conditions. So actually, right now, if you walk through Bangladesh and you look at the colors of the rivers, you will see which colors will be in fashion in Europe in the next months, because there's so much pollution and there are very, very bad working conditions for the people who are producing our clothes. So what we want is that we value the work that people are doing and that we use the resources that we use smartly. And it's also a climate question because we know that the textile industry is contributing to 10% of global emissions. So we really have to look at this industry like we do look at other questions, for example, traffic, etc.
We are not anti-industry, but we need clean industry to protect the health of our citizens.
We are talking about how to become climate neutral and how to be more responsible with the resources we use. In the question of packaging, we have a complete direct development in the last years. In the last 10 years, our packaging amounts were climbing up to 20%, although we said that we want to become climate neutral. So what we are doing now on the European level with the packaging regulation is to make sure that we are reducing packaging by banning unnecessary packaging and make sure that companies are obligated that those packaging they bring on the European market actually have to be recyclable. So these are really big steps to make sure that we use our resources more cleverly and put down our waste. By recyclable, we mean that products that are put on the European market actually can be put down in their origin material and then they can be reused. This is the thing we want to achieve, but we also need less resources that are used in the first place.
And for us, the Socialists and Democrats, the centre-left political group, we're determined to have a Green Deal with a red heart. Radical climate action which costs the polluters and not the people. We need laws to make sure that the polluters pay. It's the money of the polluters that will finance the transition. And we need to support vulnerable citizens in this transition, because it's not just about the goal, but how we get there.
Actually, when we voted on the end of the combustion engine in the European Parliament, I got a very angry call by my father who said, how should I get from A to B without my diesel? And I told him, well, the problem, first of all, this does not apply to you because we only talk about new cars that shouldn't be there from 2035 on. But you should ask yourself, how can you be mobile in a climate neutral future if there's nobody caring about you having access to the alternatives? So this was what we discussed then, and we agreed that to be mobile in a climate neutral future, he doesn't need the combustion engine. He needs very well equipped e-infrastructure. He needs public transportation that can bring him from A to B. So this was the answer from a problem that he thought he has when we ban old technologies, although the problem is to really make accessible for everyone the new technologies that are needed in the climate neutral future. So in the past, there was a very lucrative business model. It was exploiting people and planet, exploiting fossil fuels. And I think those who brought us into this mess, they have to pay the price. So the polluters have to pay and not the citizens who don't have access to the alternatives.
To support people like Dilara's father, we have successfully obtained a Just Transition Fund and a Social Climate Fund to bring everyone on board the transition to climate neutrality. From 2027, funds will support vulnerable citizens in different ways, helping them make their homes more energy efficient, helping them access less polluting modes of transport, and making sure that no one loses their job in the transition. A Green Deal with a red heart means leaving no one behind. The climate transition, getting towards a climate neutral society, that requires putting ambition into law. The Fit for 55 package is our package of proposals to align our laws with our climate goals, so 55% emissions reductions by 2030. And it's all very well and good insisting on certain standards in Europe, but wouldn't it put us at a global disadvantage? That's where the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism comes in.
Mr. Mohammed Shaheen on the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, adopted and thereby the...
I'm very happy about the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. Why? Very simple. For more than 15 years, we've asked our producer to become sustainable and make economic growth, and they delivered. Now it's time that companies from outside of Europe, if they want to sell their products within Europe, they have to make sure that those products are clean, and if not, they have to pay at the border.
With climate anxiety increasingly a concern amongst people, especially young people, the right and far right are creating a false dichotomy of helping nature versus helping the economy and people. But in reality, it's both. We need to transition to a climate neutral future because otherwise there isn't a future. And the Green Deal is a good thing for Europe even on their terms. It's a global competitive edge with EU leadership in green tech and increased competitiveness.
Combating the climate crisis is personal because we know that if we don't do it, the ones who already struggle with daily life will be the ones who will hit hardest. And we don't see that there is an ambition, especially on the conservative side, to actually make sure that the climate transition is working for everybody. They say or they claim that it's about protecting the poor. If they block Green Deal initiatives, they say it's because of social reasons. But what they are doing is helping business models that benefited from the status quo. And this is something that we as socialists cannot accept. We want to make sure that the climate transition continues delivering good jobs in Europe to safe environment, to healthy environment for people, and this is what we will fight for.
But of course, things are not done overnight. There's a lot to be done.
But some of it could unfortunately be undone by the rise of the far right.
Or by climate enemies.
The far right is rising, and in the European elections this year, they may get loads of seats. They may, for the first time, have some real power over how the EU works, as they could be propped up by the so-called centre-right. So much of what we've achieved, from women's rights to the Green Deal, is under threat. We want to be hopeful, but everything is hanging by a thread.
We're the Social Democrats, a centre-left political party in the European Parliament, and we sit here. We've been working with a lot of political parties on the Green Deal, and for a long time we had an agreement, a cross-party consensus. But lately, the EPP, the Christian Democrats, have broken the deal. They increasingly get into bed with the far right and deny the urgency to act against climate change.
From here, the far right, like Vox, are completely denying the climate crisis. like Trump or Bolsonaro. And this is denying the science and the knowledge that we know. We in Europe, we are sons of the enlightening, and they are denying that.
But there is hope for the future, as moving away from fossil fuels will give young people new job opportunities, and producing our own clean energy will mean that Europe is no longer dependent on autocrats.
Think of it, 20 years down the line. Imagine a world where our fear of unemployment is replaced by excitement about the new emerging opportunities from sustainable sectors. A world in which threats from autocrats can't scare us because we're not dependent on them any longer. A world in which young people are not scared to have children, but excited to bring them into a world full of opportunities. And of course, that's not going to be easy. But we're not doing it because it's easy. We're doing it because it's hard. Because making the hard choice today is what is going to bring us the future worth living in tomorrow.
There's a lot of despair and anxiety, but there's also opportunity for hope. If we can make the polluters pay, support everyone in the transition and build new jobs and industries, we can imagine a new era of prosperity and environmental sustainability. Well, that's it from us. Until next time, thanks for investigating what we're doing to combat the climate crisis and make sure that the transition is fair for everyone. Take care.